is the most dominant UFC champion of all time. Now, I've compiled a list of 13 fighters out of the thousands over the years we've seen, out of the hundreds of different champions. I've compiled a list of the 13 most dominant champions of all time in UFC history. I'm going to be ranking them from least dominant to absolute GOAT of all time in terms of dominance for a UFC champion. I had to get into the weeds with this one, dude. It was very difficult to do this list and organize these rankings. Everybody on this list is an absolute monster, a legend. These are all future Hall of Famers. So what I did was I broke it down into 3 categories. First category is going to be destroyed and or dominated. That's either getting a finish or getting or the fight being one-way traffic, right? Complete domination. The champion took minimal damage. There was really not much adversity whatsoever. It was just a dominant victory, right? Second category, competitive and or controversial, meaning, the champion maybe had to walk through some adversity in that fight, maybe got rocked at some point, maybe was caught in a tight submission, or the fight was a controversial decision. Maybe it was a robbery, like a Jones-Reyes. That's going to be my second category, competitive and or controversial. And then the last category is going to be their championship losses, right? I'm only going to be ranking these guys on their championship history. The rest of their career is going to be held out here. It's just championship fights only. So let's get into it. You can see here in the background, I have Alexandre Pantoja. He's sitting at my number 13 spot. You look at this guy's career, he's undefeated in title fights so far. 3 of his 5 championship wins have been dominant, especially like the last couple where he submitted Asakura, he submitted Kai Kara France. You look at the Brandon Royval fight, he took him down like 10 times in that fight, dominated in the grappling, one-way traffic. Moreno and Usyk, those were competitive fights. Moreno was a split decision to win the belt. Pantoja kind of just, out-grappled him, won the key positions, kind of held on to him, and just chose to go position over submission in that fight to eke out a decision. Usyk, it was 2-2 going into the 5th. 5th round was even very close, but Usyk made a mistake, allowing Pantoja to get on top, control position for to finish out that round, and he ekes out a decision over there. Besides those 2 fights, dude, it's been one-way traffic with this guy in his reign. This is a guy probably, if he keeps winning, will undoubtedly move up this list. But for now, I have Alexandre Pantoja sitting at my number 13 spot. Moving up, number 12. I have Jose Aldo. So, looking at his career, it wasn't as dominant as you would think, right? Obviously, the Kenny Florian, Chad Mendes one where he got the knockout. First Frankie Edgar fight, Chan Sung Jung, and Ricardo Lamas. Those were one-way traffic. He had a bunch of defenses, dude. Bunch of defenses, but 5 of those, really only about 5 of his title fights were one-way traffic, right? That second Mendes fight was an absolute war. Both men took so much damage. But he clearly won the fight. But that fight was an absolute war. Second Edgar fight, very competitive. I remember a lot of people thinking Edgar won at the time. I had Jose winning the fight. But again, very, very highly competitive, close fight. Mark Hominick, he did clearly win the fight, but that was his first title defense. He ran out of gas in the 4th and 5th, and Mark Hominick was brutalizing him with ground and pound. But he still had banked enough rounds to win that fight. So those are the competitive fights and or controversial with the Edgar fight. Now, championship losses, you look at the 2 to Holloway, one-way traffic, Holloway dominated. Or no, I think the first Holloway fight, he did rock Holloway. And then Holloway eventually finished him in the later rounds. Second fight, it wasn't close. McGregor knocked him out in 13 seconds. Very, very dominant. Number 2 featherweight of all time. I don't care what you say. I have him at the number. Well, I don't know. Probably number 3. Just because he lost to Holloway. He lost to Volk. He doesn't have a win over either of those guys. I can't, in good faith, put him above that. But still, number 3 greatest featherweight all time. Fairly dominant guy. So I got him sitting at my number 12 spot. Moving on to number 11. Kamaru Usman. I have Kamaru Usman low on this list, and I'm going to tell you why. I feel like I'm one of the few who looks at his body of work as a champion, and I honestly don't think it was that dominant. Like, it wasn't complete one-way traffic in almost any of the fights he had, right? So Woodley to win the belt, that was one-way traffic, complete and utter domination. And then both the Masvidal fights were pretty one-sided. Obviously, the second fight, he hits him with that big overhand and sleeps him. But, like, you look at the majority of this guy's fights, both fights with Covington were fairly close and competitive, right? First fight, 2-2 going into the fifth. He finishes Colby in the fifth. Second fight in Madison Square Garden. He banks the first 3 rounds. Colby comes on strong, wins the last 2 rounds. Gilbert Burns had him hurt in the first round, had Kamaru on skates. Kamaru came back in the second and put him away on the feet. Then you look at the Edwards losses. Gets KO'd in the second Edwards fight and then loses the decision in the third Edwards fight. All in all, dude, I don't think he had the cleanest championship run. Was he impressive? Yes. Was he well-rounded? Yes. Could nobody deal with his wrestling? Yes. But almost every championship fight this guy had was a highly competitive fight. So he wasn't as dominant as you would think. But he is the number 2 greatest welterweight of all time. So I do have him at my number 11 spot. Now, breaking in to the top 10, starting it off, I have Israel Adesanya, the style bender. I think he had the more clean championship reign than Kamaru. I'm going to be honest with you. I think he overall as a champion is better than Kamaru Usman. You look at his championship reign, 4 or 5 title defenses, knocks out Whitaker to win the belt. Second title defense, destroys Paulo Costa in the second round. Marvin Vettori was one-way traffic. He did get taken down a few times, but got right back up and continued picking him apart. Jared Cannonier, he picked him apart over 5 rounds, really took no damage. Like, dude, the first, 2 years of this guy's championship reign, he really didn't take any damage. I put Romero in the competitive fight because it was close, because just neither guy did shit. But, Romero did not damage him by any means, right? Izzy didn't start taking damage until, the Pereira fight, right? He was taking damage. He got TKO'd in that first Pereira fight. The second Pereira fight where he knocked him out, I feel like he was losing the fight. He was getting buckled with starting to get buckled with leg kicks. His legs were compromised. Pereira had him up against the fence, was teeing off, was looking for the same kind of TKO as the first fight, and he just got clipped by Izzy. So, again, that was highly competitive until the finish. Second Whitaker fight, super close. I do think Izzy won, but I also, it was a very, very close fight where you weren't sure which way the judges were going to go. And then championship losses, obviously. First Pereira won, which he was winning, but it's still a loss. Sean Strickland dominated him over 5 rounds. Duplessis choked him out in the 4th. Pretty clean championship reign for this guy, man. That's why he takes that number 10 spot. Moving on, number 9. I got Khabib Nurmagomedov. So, not the biggest sample size compared to these other guys. I mean, everybody on this list has 4+ title defenses except for Khabib, but bro, almost every single fight this guy was in was not even remotely close. Even the championship victories I put in here that under the competitive category, he still won all those rounds against those guys. It's just Iaquinta put up a good fight, was stuffing a lot of the takedowns, made it hard for Khabib to just steamroll him. But he did win every round. Now, Gaethje was hurting the legs of Khabib in the first round with those calf kicks. Khabib did win the round, but he did have to overcome some adversity. Justin put up a good fight until being finished in the second round. And then obviously he destroys McGregor. I don't care McGregor won a round. He destroyed him. He smashed him on the ground. Choked him out in the 4th. McGregor outpointed him 1 round. Cool story, bro. Domination. Dustin Poirier, domination, right? Outside of Gleison Tibau, this guy sliced through everybody like a knife through hot butter. Nobody was close with this guy. This guy probably lost 2 rounds in his whole UFC career. 2-3 rounds in his whole career. That's it. Other than that, he smashed everybody. He smoked them. Nobody could deal with his grappling. Like, he was just so far above all of his competitors almost all the time, every fight he stepped in. That's why I got him breaking into that 9 spot. Now, I'm going to tell you, there's another guy who I chose to keep off this list who doesn't have the biggest sample size either. That guy is going to be Ilia Topuria. Let me tell you why. So comparing these two, Ilia was 6-0 in the UFC when he got the shot against Volkanovski. And honestly, his only two notable wins were Bryce Mitchell and Josh Emmett. Those were his only two ranked wins. Going into that fight, he's sitting on 3 championship victories over legends so far. Now, let's look at Khabib going into that title shot against Al Iaquinta for the vacant belt after they had stripped Conor McGregor. 9-0 in the UFC. Wins over Rafael Dos Anjos, Michael Johnson, Gleison Tibau, Thiago Tavares. Now, Tavares, I believe Tibau was ranked. I don't know if Tavares was, but Tavares is a guy who had over 10 UFC victories. Same thing with Gleison Tibau. This guy was beating ranked contenders. This guy was beating dangerous prospects like Abel Trujillo, Pat Healy, who was a crafty submission artist, who had a very successful career outside the UFC. Like, this guy beat a lot of noteworthy people and smashed all of them except for Gleison Tibau before he even got a shot at the belt. So it's like, dude, the domination and the notable victories before this guy even fought for it, you'd have to think, had Khabib have been there earlier at that championship level, this guy'd probably be sitting on 6-7 title defenses before retiring in 2020. So I have Khabib sitting at that number, was it number 9 or was it number 8? I think that was number 9. Let me go back. Oh, no. Yeah, number 9. Number 9. All right, moving on to number 8. Alexander Volkanovski. Pretty clean, pretty dominant championship reign. Obviously, that third Holloway fight, he left no doubts. Brian Ortega, I put that in the dominated category. I do. Because, like, I can't put that in the competitive category because outside of those deep submission threats that Ortega had in that fight, and he had 2 of them, the mounted guillotine was nasty. Super dangerous. But, like, Volkanovski got out of both of those submissions and absolutely smashed Ortega and made him pay dearly for it. He smashed him up throughout that fight. Ortega probably had 2 minutes of, like, light at the end of the tunnel in that fight. But, you know, he was getting smashed before the submission attempts. He was getting smashed after the submission attempts. Look at his face versus Volk at the end of that fight, dude. That'll tell you all you need to know. Volkanovski completely dominated that fight. Chan Sung Jung, Korean Zombie, dominated him. Yair Rodriguez dominated him. Competitive fights, Lopez, I would say, was competitive just because he dropped Volk in one of the rounds. But other than that, it was pretty much one-way traffic. But I do have to put that in competitive because we're nitpicking. These guys are the best. We got to nitpick. First 2 Holloway fights, pretty close, pretty competitive fights. And then obviously the championship losses. I should have put the other 2, right? He has 1 featherweight title loss to Ilia Topuria, and then the other 2 to Islam Makhachev. So Volkanovski sitting in my number 8 spot. Number 7, I got DC, obviously the second greatest light heavyweight of all time. Knocked Stipe out, submitted Derek Lewis, destroyed Volkan Oezdemir. I put the Rumble Johnson fights in competitive simply because, like, the first round in both fights were either competitive or he had DC in deep shit. First fight between Rumble Johnson and DC, he had DC on skates in that first round. He hit him with a big shot, won that round. DC came back eventually and choked him out with a rear naked choke. Second fight, pretty competitive. Rumble was trying to wrestle a lot more in that fight, but it was competitive. Both those fights, DC had to walk through adversity to get that victory. Alexander Gustafsson was a split decision, super close fight. DC just did a little bit more to eke out a victory there. And then obviously, I'm only going to give him 1 championship loss against Jones. Jones cheated the second fight. It doesn't count. He tested positive. And then obviously, you know, to finish out his career, he had 2 straight Stipe Miocic losses. 1 was a finish. 1 was a one-sided decision. But other than that, dude, DC in his prime was a nightmare. You know you were getting tossed on your head. You could get knocked out. you were going to get taken down and you probably weren't going to get back up for the rest of the round. Number 2 greatest light heavyweight of all time. Number 7 most dominant champion of all time. Moving on to the number 6 spot. I got Islam Makhachev. Obviously, so far, right, he has 5 title wins, right? You look at the dominant ones, most of his, obviously, 4 out of his 5 title wins have been finishes. Very, very impressive. Moicano, most recently in January, he made quick work of. Volkanovski, the second fight, he made quick work of that with a head kick knockout in the first round. Oliveira, he demolished to win the belt. Now, competitive, obviously that first Volk fight, we're going to put that there. Very, very close fight. I do think Islam won it fair and square, but it was a close fight. Poirier, by the eye test, made Islam look human. That's why he goes in this category. But, you know, Islam came into that fight. He had staff. Can't make an exception. This is the greatest list here. Most dominant champions list. Can't make an exception. But he did have staff. Looked very human. When Dustin Poirier is, like, screaming at you, talking shit on the feet and landing on you, I have to put that in competitive. However, Islam dominated that fight. I mean, he won. He was winning every round. Eventually submitted him in the 5th round. But it has to go into competitive. Again, depending on what happens with the JDM fight, this guy may move up. I don't think he probably loses a step based on how dominant he is. But him moving up depends on him being JDM. But for now, we got him at the 6th spot. All right. Now, best of the best here. Top 5 most dominant champions UFC history. It just got tougher and tougher the more I went through this list of guys. Top 5 is brutal. You have to nitpick so much. But starting at the number 5 spot, I got Stipe Miocic. Greatest heavyweight of all time. Very, very dominant. Finished almost every championship fight he had. Lost 2 championship fights, right? To Ngannou once and DC once. But he's beaten everybody he's ever fought in a championship setting. Okay? That's what makes this guy the GOAT. He's defeated everybody who's ever beaten him. Right? He defeated DC twice. Finished DC once. Dominant decision in the 3rd fight. Pretty dominant decision over Ngannou. You know, grappled him, tired him the fuck out. Kind of schooled him on the ground. Like, showed Ngannou that there's levels to this, right? This was earlier in Ngannou. He showed Ngannou levels. Finished JDS, Junior Dos Santos. Knocked out Werdum in the 1st round to win the belt. He did finish Alistair Overeem, but he did get rocked and caught in the guillotine in that fight. And that was one of those controversial things where Joe was still interviewing fighters who had been knocked out. Because Overeem got brutally finished on the ground with ground and pound from Stipe. Stipe put him out cold. And after the fight, Joe went to interview him, and he's like, he tapped. He tapped in my guillotine. And Joe was, like, sitting here interviewing this guy who did not have his wits about him, being like, hey, where is it? Where did he tap? I don't see it. Where did he tap? This is what Joe would argue with these guys who were, like, literally just out of their mind, who'd just been brutally knocked out. And you would be arguing with these guys, trying to disprove them. It was a bit brutal to watch, but, you know, it was controversial up until Stipe finished him. He got hurt. He was caught in a guillotine, but ultimately finished the fight. So that's really his only competitive fight in the heavyweight title picture. And then obviously we already went through the championship losses, but Stipe breaks in the top 5. Moving on to the fourth spot. God. 4th spot. All right. We got Anderson the Spider Silva. Looking at this guy's championship reign, dude, there was 2 fights, 2 championship victories this guy had that even went to a decision, okay? He finished almost every single person that he beats, right? Including these guys on the competitive controversial. All of these, all of these are legit finishes outside of the Cote fight. They are competitive. Travis Lutter had him in deep shit. In the 1st round, he ended up submitting him with a triangle. Like the first Chael Sonnen fight, Chael was, 2 minutes away from being the world champion. Got caught in that triangle. You know Chael, like he thought like tapping meant the round was over. It would go to the scorecards and Chael would win probably 4-1. And then the second fight, Lost the first round to Chael, got grappled, and then Chael did the dumbest shit ever in the second round. Spinning back fists. Fell to the ground, stumbled to the ground. Silva finished him off there. So those were his competitive fights, but he did win all those competitive fights. Patrick Cote, he did take damage in the Luter and both the Sonnen, or at least the first Sonnen fight and the Travis Luter fight. Cote didn't really damage him, but he was hanging with him, landing shots on the feet, making it competitive, and then just blew it, stepped wrong in like the fourth round, blew his knee out. Silva wins by, it's technical knockout is the term for that when that happens because of injury. And then obviously he lost the back-to-back title fights to Weidman. Dude, like people like drop this guy down on their GOAT list, and I don't know why, dude. Like watching this guy in his prime just humiliating dudes, talking shit to them. Like this guy has some of the best like clip farming moments in MMA history, bar none. Very, very dominant champion. I think he had 11 title defenses. Again, dude, 11 title defenses. Only 2 of those went to decision. Right? Only 2 of those went to decision. So that's why I have this guy at my number 4 spot. Very, very dominant champion. Moving on. Top 3. All right, third spot I got Mighty Mouse. I do think he was more dominant than Silva. Like, dude, you look at this guy's career. He did finish almost everybody he fought in a title setting, right? Ray Borg was single-handedly one of the greatest sequences of all time where he picked him up with a double leg in midair as he's bringing him down, snatches the arm to pull off the armbar submission. Absolutely insane. Henry Cejudo, the first fight, he TKOs him with a knee to the body in the first. Schools Jon Dotson in the rematch in the second fight. Schools Kyoji Horiguchi, Chris Cariaso, Ali Bagutinov. Knocks out Joseph Benavidez in the rematch. Schools John Moraga, finishes him. Really, the only had about 3 super competitive championship fights. And that was Benavidez, the first fight to win the belt. He won a split decision. Close fight. Jon Dotson actually dropped him multiple times in their first fight. Like, that was the first time we saw this guy look semi-human, and they just went on a crazy run after that. Tim Elliott was giving him some problems in the grappling, was threatening submissions, very crafty with that awkward style. Gave DJ a pretty good test, but ultimately DJ clearly won all of those fights. The Benavidez fight, I don't know, maybe you can argue the first fight. Pretty close fight. And then obviously controversial, but he did lose the rematch to Henry Cejudo. His only championship loss, 11 title defenses, finished almost all of his title wins that he had. Barely ever went to decision. This guy was miles above the competition for so long. But, this guy, let's put Donald Cerrone in the UFC Hall of Fame right away, and Uriah Faber. Let's put him and those guys in the Hall of Fame. But DJ, let's hold off on that. Let's pump the brakes. Let's pump. What are you doing, Dana? He's the number 3 most dominant champion of all time. Okay. Moving on to the number 2 spot, I got Georges St Pierre. This guy's beaten everybody he's ever fought. Even the 2 championship losses to Matt Serra, Matt Hughes, he came back and got revenge in brutal, brutal fashion. Matt Serra, he absolutely dominated to get the belt back. Matt Hughes, super early in his career, right? In a fight, he was winning. He was beating Hughes. This was when Hughes was the man, like one of the faces of the UFC. I think he had like 4 or 5 title defenses at that point. He was like one of the most dominant fighters in the UFC. George was schooling him on the feet, outpointing him, out-wrestling him, and got caught in an armbar and tapped right as time had expired. Had this guy have just waited and tried to fight through the armbar a little bit more, that Hughes fight probably isn't on here because he was on his way to winning that. He was schooling Hughes in that fight and just got caught early in his career, dude. It is what it is, right? He destroyed and dominated most guys he fought. Like, for 5 years plus, dude, nobody could touch Georges St Pierre. Nobody could deal with how dynamic he was. Like, he was one of the first guys who was just a complete mixed martial artist, right? He could wrestle with anybody in the world. He could strike with anybody in the world. He could do jiu-jitsu with anybody in the world. Like, there was not one weakness this guy had. Nobody could touch him for so long. I think he was the first guy who kind of revolutionized, well-roundedness and training with the best in each discipline. Like if you watch this guy's old countdowns, this guy's training with the Long brothers, who were like world champion Muay Thai fighters. One of his coaches, Phil Nurse, former world champion Muay Thai. I think for Ross was a former world champ in kickboxing or Muay Thai. Obviously he was later into his career. He trained with Freddie Roach. Freddie Roach was his boxing coach. Jiu-jitsu, he trained with guys like Gordon Ryan, the Danaher Death Squad up at the Henzo Gracie Academy in New York. Best of the best there. Wrestling, he was like training with the Russian national team. Like, he's one of the guys who just revolutionized the game in that aspect of well-roundedness and just honing in on each discipline and becoming world-class in everything he did. It wasn't later on into his career where when he started to slow down, we started seeing some of the damage this guy would take. But like, dude, his first, let's see, one, two, or sorry, one, like the first 8 fights, bro. Like the first 8 championship, like when he got the belt back from Matt Serra, like 8 straight fights, like nobody could touch this guy. It wasn't close. They didn't win a second of the fight. Obviously, as he got later into his career, he started taking a bit more damage. The Shields fight was pretty competitive. He did clearly win. However, it was a competitive fight, but he didn't really take much damage. Carlos Condit, he did take a good amount of damage in that fight. He was busted up at the end of it. He did win almost every single round. Got head kicked. This is the first ever time I saw Georges St Pierre human, is when he got kicked in the head by Carlos Condit in like the second or third round and dropped and was this close to being finished. Like, I just remember sitting there, my jaw dropping, being like, George is a human? Since when has George been a human? So, close fight. He took a lot of damage. Or not a close fight, but he took damage, but he clearly won the fight. Bisping's, that was his retirement fight. He did have visual damage. He was bleeding at the end of it, but he was kicking Bisping's ass, dominating the fight. He choked him out, dropped him and choked him out. Johnny Hendricks is the only fight on this guy's career where it's like that fight ended and you honest to God didn't know who won. I feel like this could have gone either way. I go back and watch it. I think George just did a little bit more. But again, I wouldn't have been disappointed if they would have given the fight to Hendricks. Super close, very, very highly controversial fight. But that's really the only one in his career, right? And he avenged both of his championship losses. So undoubtedly, Georges St Pierre is the second most dominant UFC champion of all time. I think it's honest, who's number one. I don't like it, but I have to give respect where respect is due. Terrible human being, but you can't really, like, at least in terms of this guy's first title run, you can't say shit about it, dude. It's just pure, utter domination. Outside of one fight, every fight was dominant. It's Jon Jones, man. Look, I understand his second reign at light heavyweight. He had the Reyes fight. He had the close fight with Jesus Christ, Thiago Santos, which I don't think I. Oh yeah, I put that in. Thiago Santos. Very, very close fights, but like you look at his first run as a light heavyweight, like the prime Jones years. Because like I think after all that shit when he came back, like I don't think he was in his prime anymore. But you look at what he did to Shogun, who would have win the belt, total domination. He embarrassed Shogun. He embarrassed Rampage Jackson, dominated him, picked Rashad Evans apart for 5 rounds, beat Chael Sonnen up, beat Glover Teixeira up, clearly handedly beat Daniel Cormier in that first fight. Ovin St. Preux was his first fight back. He controlled the majority of that fight. Second Gustafsson fight, he dominated that and redeemed that first fight with Gustafsson. Anthony Smith, he had the illegal strike, but it was one-way traffic. He wasn't taking damage. Smith was doing nothing. Obviously, Cyril Gane chokes him out first. I don't know if he might have taken 1 punch, 2 punches in that fight. And then Stipe Miocic, old man Stipe was one-sided. Even if you take away, like, the Gane and Miocic fight, bro, like, it's still clear this guy is just the most dominant. he has too much of a resume to not put him as the most dominant champion. Again, he was another one of those guys, like, in his prime, in his first title reign, like, you just couldn't touch this guy. You couldn't touch this guy. Nobody could deal with him. He was so far above everybody else skill-wise. He did face a test early on in Machida. I think that was his second title defense. Machida gave him problems with that blitzing style, that blitzing karate style in the first, landing a lot of shots on Jones, but Jones, made the adjustment, came out in round 2, and caught this guy in the nastiest standing guillotine I've ever seen, choked him out, and then dropped his dead carcass on the canvas and walked off. One of the nastiest submissions I'll ever see. Prime Jones was just, he was fun to watch, dude. Like, before we all grew to hate this guy, like, it was really, really, like, you just were pumped because you knew, like, there was just nothing his opponents could do. He was going to go out there and just absolutely toy with him. I don't like it, but I have to give him the respect, dude. You just can't touch the resume of Jon Jones. He was just pure dominant, in terms of his first reign. Let's be honest, it was impressive what he did to Cyril. I mean, Cyril doesn't have much of a ground game, but, like, Ngannou went to a close fight with this guy. Like, besides that, like, Cyril's beaten everybody else in that division that he's fought. And to go out there and do what he did to Cyril, super impressive. Yeah, dude, I have Jon Jones at my number 1 most dominant UFC champion of all time. So yeah, that's the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. How would you reorder this list? Who do you have? How would you rank this list from 13 to best? Would you change the top 5 out? Does this list suck? Let me know. Right? Would you take Khabib and would you replace Khabib with Ilya? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Drop a like, subscribe to the channel. Until next time. See ya.